Rev up your engines! Alright, today I'm going to show you a very common problem. A bad tensioner for your drive belt. We used to call them fan belts, but now you call them drive belts. Now, times have changed. They're almost all automatic tensioners. Back in the day, fan belts were, you had to adjust the alternators, tighten them up, tighten the power steering pump, so the belts wouldn't squeal. They wear, they stretch, they start squealing, they don't wear right. So they came up with automatic tensioners quite some time ago. They're spring loaded and they automatically adjust the tension on the belt. Now, from a purely engineering standpoint, they're better designed because with the old belts, you had to be a pro mechanic like me, because if you got them too loose, they'd squeal, but if you got them too tight, it would burn the bearings out. So you could burn out your air conditioner bearing, you could burn out your water pump bearing, because you get them too tight, there's too much stress. The automatic tensioners, on the other hand, are exactly automatic. They're designed by engineers. They have the right amount of tension, so you don't really have to think about anything, and it won't prematurely wear out parts. And I do have to say, fixing cars the last 53 years, when I started going to these automatic tensioners, I had to replace less water pumps, less air conditioning compressors, less power steering pumps. But there's one downside to the system. Eventually, the automatic tensioners break down and you got to replace them. So that's what we're going to do on this Toyota, because it makes some noise when it's cold, because it's just worn out. They just lose some of their tension. The bearings wear out over time. Now, my customer here, he brought two tensioners because he didn't know which one he was going to use. Well, guess what? This one was made in Japan. So, we're going with the one made in Japan. You're much better. It's going to last a really long time. I've seen people buy the cheap ones at AutoZone, O'Reilly, you name it. And often, they don't tighten them right. They squeal from the get-go, or they make noise because the spring isn't correct, so it rattles. Or after a year or 6 months or whatever, they break and you got to do the job over again. So get the right one if you're going to replace it. Don't go too cheap. After all, the original one on this lasted 14 years, so if you get 14 years out of this, you can't complain. Now, there's no working room on these things, so we're going to jack the car up, put a jack stand under there, take the tire off so we can access it better. So I'll take the wheel off. Take the stupid little cover off. There's the main belt. Then we take the inner fender liner out, or at least get it out of the way. Because of this design, you need a serpentine belt tool so you can get it off. There's no working room in there. When you put the tool on here, it's 14 millimeter. You turn it counterclockwise, and then the belt comes off. Now we got to get the tensioner off. And in this case, if you study it closely, you'll see it's behind the air conditioning compressor, so we gotta move that out of the way too. Curse the evil swine engineers just trying to save space and using one bolt for two things. So we got all this plastic crap off. We got a 14 millimeter, and we gotta unbolt the air conditioning compressor and get it out of the way. So after unbolting half of the car, taking the alternator out of the way, moving the air conditioner, we're going to try to get to the bolts at the bottom. Now I can see why the Toyota dealer is going to charge you $1,200 to do this job. It's a royal pain in the rear end. It's real easy on a 4-cylinder one, but not on the V6s. What seemed like endless swearing and taking parts off. Here's the old one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bolts. 2, 3, 4, 5. It looks exactly the same, so now we got to put it back together again. Light it in the front, then bolt it on. And before we finish, we're going to put the belt on. It's got a new fan belt, and of course, who knows where it goes? You might want to take a picture of it, but I got all data, so I just look it up on my phone. There it is. Shows you where the belt goes. Take a picture beforehand or look it up on the internet. We put all the plastic back. And the wheels. Well, the wheels on. It's ready to go. What a pain in the butt, just for a tensioner. And here's some bonus questions and answers. Tom Vanderloop says, I want to buy an Audi A3 1.4 TFSI from 2010. Is it a good car? Do you have advice? I love how it looked. Well, you live in Europe, obviously. Yeah, you love how it looks. Well, if you owned one, you probably wouldn't love how they break down regularly, too, and are super expensive to fix. I would not buy that. Audi makes very good-looking cars, kind of like Chrysler always has. Chrysler's always made good-looking cars that broke down all the time. Audi is even worse. Theirs cost a lot more to fix. 6, and they break down even more than the Chryslers did. You value your money, don't buy it unless you really like the way it looks, and then park it in your front lawn and use it as a lawn ornament. Mark Vegas says, greetings, Scotties from LA. Is it true it's a good time to sell a car but a bad time to buy a car? It certainly is. People say, man, I got offered all this money for my used car. I said, yeah, but you need a car. And they say, yeah, well, you're going to have to buy another one. You're going to end up paying too much for that. So keep what you have. Don't waste your time. But on the other hand, let's say you're going somewhere to Europe for a couple of years, or somebody's joined the Army or the Navy or whatever. Now's a great time to sell a car if you don't have to replace it. Or let's say you got 3 or 4 cars and you only need 1 or 2. Sell the extra ones now and you can get some really good money for it. Especially in La La Land. Everybody's looking for cars out there. GC says, is a Mercedes E230 straight 6, 1993 reliable? Well, it was very reliable when it was new, but that was what, 29 years ago. Today, probably not too reliable. Car that old, Mercedes-Benz parts cost a small fortune. And now back in the day, 93, Mercedes made excellent vehicles that could run a really long time. And of course, it depends on the miles. If somebody's driven the heck out of it and it's got 500,000 miles on it, how much life is left? No one knows. But they were better made back in the day. There's no arguing that. Back in 93, that sucker was made in Deutschland. It wasn't made in Alabama or someplace. It was made in Germany, and they build better cars there, even today. The German-made ones are better. GM says, Scotty, my buddy's giving me a 2013 Hyundai Veloster. It wasn't started, so he changed the battery, and the starter started smoking. Is it worth it to change the starter? It depends. Now, you're getting it for nothing, and if changing a starter gets it to run, what the heck? It's a free car, right? They said it started smoking. The first thing you want to do is this, and it'll save you from a whole bunch of grief. Get a long extension bar, 3 feet or longer, with a socket that fits on the front of the engine, on the front crank bolt. See if you can turn the engine over 2 times. So that's 720 degrees. If you can't turn it, or it turns a little and it goes clunk and you can't turn it, the engine's locked up. Don't even bother with picking the thing up. The engine's junk. If your engine's locked up and you turn the key to the starter and the starter's turning against the locked up engine, it's just going to go, and then it'll start smoking because it's getting so hot because it can't turn a locked up engine. It'd be like trying to push a 50-ton boulder. It's not going to move, but whatever's trying to push it is going to start overheating. So try that first. If you can spin it around, sure, try a starter. But if you can't turn it around twice, it locks up, engine shot, don't even waste your time with that thing. Freddie Redmond said, is the new 0W16 synthetic oil better than the 0W20 synthetic oil for turbocharged engines? Engineers design cars for a certain weight oil, and they do it for a reason. Turbochargers of all the spinning and extra pressure thrown into the engine. You're better with a 0W20 oil for the average turbocharged vehicle. But, and this is a pretty big but, let's say you got one of those Honda 1.5 liter turbocharged GDI engines that was getting oil dilution. In that case, I would switch it to a 016 because that's made especially to stop oil dilution and problems. But still, most other cars, if your call for 020, you don't use 016. You use 020. The new oils are called GF6, but the 0W16 is a special kind of G6 oil. Older cars, like 020, they still can use GF6 oil, but it'll say 020. It won't say 016, and that's what you'd want to use. Michael Ramirez says, Scotty, what do you think of a Mitsubishi Outlander as a family car? I'm not a Mitsubishi fan. In the United States, parts are expensive. People don't know how to fix it, and generally they fall apart as they age. I've had customers buy them, and they loved them until they got 130, 140, and then either the engine or the tranny or both went out, and they said, oh man, I'll never buy another one of these things. If you're the type of person who will buy something like that brand new when you're happy with 140,000 miles, go ahead and buy one. You might be real happy with it, but it's not going to last like a Toyota or Honda and go 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 miles or more. They just don't have the quality. Mr. 2 says, Scotty, when I start my engine on a really cold morning, RPMs go up and down slightly at idle, lasts about 15 seconds. What could be the reason behind it? When it's really cold, your engine has to get an extra amount of fuel. If it's really cold, the computers sometimes, especially if you got mileage on the vehicle, they get confused. A little bit too much fuel, but then they see that's too much and they cut it down, and then it goes too low and then they cut it up. But realize that they're computers, right? They can do thousands of calculations a second. Some of them can do millions of calculations a second. The cars aren't that complicated, so the most they can do are generally thousands of calculations a second, but that's still a lot. So that makes it go up and down a little bit. After 15 seconds, if it goes back to normal, I personally would live with it. I mean, you could clean the throttle, look for vacuum leaks and stuff like that, but if it goes away after 15 seconds, probably more than just old age and it's trying trying to equilibrate, and if it goes normal after 15 seconds and it always starts, heck, I'd live with it. Especially if you find the summer it doesn't do it at all. You'd have a heck of a time pinpointing the either software problem or sensor problem that was giving a little bit wrong data. For something that only does it for 15 seconds, it would be finding a needle in a haystack if it only does it when it's really cold. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.